Dear colleagues, dear participants of our panel session today, being the moderator, first of all, I would like to start our discussion and the information receiving from the professionals who represent different countries. They are our dominant today, the best of the best. So we would like very much to have the targeted discussion. What do I mean? Today, at many venues, there will be discussions from the standpoint of leadership and technologies, and as a rule, it will be aimed at new knowledge of the young people. In this connection, our venue is specific. Probably for the first time, we asked the professionals to analyze the problems from the viewpoint of professional vision and probably from taking into account the possibilities which the countries have, which they represent. In this connection, I would like to outline our expectations today and what questions we'll try to focus on in the course of this discussion. First of all, I would like to note that oil and gas, of course, are economic aspects. In this connection, I'd like to mention that the technological process and cost reduction are determining our future. Then the price in the oil and gas industry. Please note that this price is based on different laws. When there were oil and gas crises, including the crisis of 1997 to 2008, we have seen that petroleum companies didn't play a key role, and in the market that is called the stock market, speculation was prevailing. They heated up during that period. The attention to purchases and that were not collateralized by resources and the right to receive in the next years, that also affected the crisis situation that occurred in many countries for many years, and the price for oil as a regulator of economy. And it is quite obvious to what extent our today's economy in many countries dependent on the consumption of oil primarily. It is clear that the more we consume, the higher would be the demand. We are not eating oil, but the technology and the economy of development are consuming oil, which develops mainly based on oil and gas. But we shouldn't forget that each country has the indicators of using oil and gas that are quite different, and sometimes they differ several-fold. I'd also like to stress this. Besides, noteworthy is also the analysis of the notion of oil and gas and the environment. We shouldn't talk a lot here. We just give two figures, and that theme is theme number one for any minister who is present in this conference hall. Annually, to the atmosphere, we emit 40 billion tons of CO2. This is a super impressive figure, but they give different figures, but on the average, more than 30% of these emissions come from burning of petroleum products. And so there are different views concerning this matter as well. The next question, oil and gas as strategic raw material. It is obvious that oil and gas are not only sources of energy, which have changed in the 20th century our mode of life and the economy of the world. In our consciousness, they are integrally related with combats and wars. Let us recall that the Second World War has shown that oil was the most important strategic resource, which essentially changed the interests and strategies on the battlefield. The First World War has shown clearly that oil is the most important strategic resource. For the first time, the weapons appeared which, by its giant size, horrified the people during the battle. I would like to analyze this table. It is very important just to remind you where we live and what can expect us in the near future. These are the trends and the challenges that are related primarily with the combating for the oil and gas markets and the latest events taking place in the world in the system of combating for the markets of oil and gas. Here you can see that the last conflicts in the Middle East and the conflicts that took place beforehand are related to the same interests. Whatever is our motivation, in this sense, I would like to mention that it is very important what we are doing now. We have to understand that we're having a discussion, and these cameras and network systems that are included into the intervention field make it possible to give a signal to the public at large, so that the public at large would only understand that only diplomacy and the actions of professionals and the discussions might reduce the armed tension in many regions where they try to change the raw material markets. I would like to remind you that oil and gas represent how they represent the energy resources in the 21st century. The 19th century was the century where coal prevailed. The 20th century was the age of oil and gas. And now we have to ask ourselves, and we would like to receive the answers from the professionals, will we have no sources of renewable energy resources? What would be their share? Will there be any technology to increase the security of nuclear fuel? Should we have any new sources? Or probably for the near future it will be possible to use all the energy resources despite the opinions of the optimists and pessimists and realists. We would like to discuss these questions also because it is highly important how we have to conduct more active research, and we shouldn't also forget the role of coal in that segment. We also have to listen and to discuss the question on the necessity of taking into account several factors when considering the place of oil and gas in future. That is availability of geologically extracted reserves, what we have now. We are still discussing. I'm just opening that venue about the nature of oil and gas. Is it organic or inorganic nature? We have to find the answers because bitumoids are bedrock. If hydrogen passes every day, why are we not saying that now oil and gas can form passing through bitumoids? The question is only a temperature gradient at more than 120 degrees. Oil might form and gas might form at temperature 180 degrees and above. These identical additions, environmental problems. We might invent whatever, but we have to take into account the environmental protection. Besides, these are weaknesses and strength of renewable energy sources. Once we were quite fond of them, and we forgot that many windmills, particularly in Europe, they are quite numerous. But someone asked how many of them are really operating. They are just on the balance. They produce additional energy that is supplied there and no storage points. And what will be the outcome? Then the problems of increasing the coefficient of extraction of resources and energy saving is also quite important. It is even written in the regular laws and requirements of UN. And I would also discuss the question concerning oil and gas as an economic aspect. It is clear that this is highly important, and we hope that we are going to investigate these questions. However, the issues related to the potential of the personnel are quite important and urgent. I would like to remind you that scientific support of the development of oil and gas sector today requires a systematic approach. Let us see how many intersectoral scientific centers, target centers we have in Russia that solve the problems of increasing petroleum yield and the efficiency of using and processing of raw materials. There are some corporate centers that solve purely corporate tasks, and the same system exists in Europe, in the USA and Canada. We have to solve this problem, and of course, we have to provide the staff, the personnel. Today, oil and gas and the sectors related to their use are high-tech, science-intensive sectors, and that segment requires a new approach to personnel. And we have to realize clearly that there is an agreement among the educational institutions, among the stock market and public companies that high schools can only comply with the educational standards. As to the public and production and professional communities, they have to organize the work of the master and bachelor, so that first they will work, then pass the exams in terms of the knowledge of professional standards, and then the company will determine the level of their qualification, whether they will comply with a certain specialty or a certain position. There is also a dynamic evolution, not only in this country, but on a global scale, taking into account the latest dialogue at the London Stock Exchange, and this has to be done. So these are the main things that I would like to discuss. So the first question that I would like to ask is the common one, and we'll have the following discussion. I would like to ask my colleagues, experts, to answer using 2 or 3 sentences, because long monologues are easily organized, but it's rather difficult to give brief information. Each one will take turns. We'll start with our host, with our minister. Will you please answer the question, what is your vision of our tomorrow, the future use of oil and gas, take into account the alternative sources and take into account the resource base which is currently available to us from the viewpoint of a serious and global raw material market, please? So we'll start the discussion. Please, Alexander Valentinovich. Thank you very much, Vladimir Stefanovich. First, I would like to thank you for the wonderful introduction with a detailed analysis of the market situation. You made our life easier to a significant extent. We didn't agree that certain questions will be asked to us, but Vladimir Stefanich presented such a blitz discussion, and we're ready to work in that mode. As to the future of energy, that discussion will be mainly deployed today between the following: whether oil and gas will constitute the basis of energy balances, or renewable energy sources and other types of energy will have a greater share and probably generally will squeeze out hydrocarbons from the energy balance. I would like to give an example and to remind you that if we, for instance, take coal as one of the most important sources of energy,
likewise, there were predictions that coal will quit this market, but it was just the reverse. At the outset of 2000, at the outset of the 20th century, the share of coal in the balance amounted up to 56% in global energy balance, whereas now it's 29%. That is, the consumption scaled up 6.5-fold. And nobody is there to say that coal will disappear. Coal remains to be a very competitive source of energy. And bottom line issue is related to competitive edge of different sources of energy. As you know, presently this competition has been scaling up drastically, and the chunk on non-conventional, non-hydrocarbon sources of energy has been hiking in energy balance. But to my way of thinking, that several decades down the road, the share of hydrocarbon sources will remain high. Now it's 87% in energy balance, oil, gas, and coal. Then by 2040, and according to market researchers, this share could slump to 75-72%, giving up part of this niche in to new renewables, hydrogen, wind, solar energy. This is all about competitive edge. Hydrocarbon energy is getting cleaner, new technologies coming up, and from the standpoint of economy, nowadays it's most competitive when it comes to the cost of production, and mindful of the development of global economy. Energy costs are a very big chunk in this composition. And new groundbreaking energy conservation, energy efficient technologies are coming up. Global economy will double, but energy consumption will grow only by 35%. So one way or the other, energy consumption will scale up. It's common knowledge that progress moves as progress, but it will be getting cheaper, and the competition will toughen among different sources of energy. Well, nowadays, a daily global community consumes 88 million barrels daily altogether. Pessimistic minds are saying that in the nearest future, this share will drop to 75. Optimistic people are making a clear stand that the resources are plentiful in the world, so it could amount up to 140-150 million before mid-21st century. So, according to academia, the optimum production will not be higher than 100. It will be in the band between 60 to 100. So what's your take on the future market development along those lines? I'll be brief. Presently, according to the forecast, the consumption growth of oil in the world until 2024 will be 1.2 million barrel daily extra. Then the consumption will go down in 2040. It will be 0.3, 0.5 million barrel daily altogether. But that ensues from the current stage of affairs and technology and economy. Everything could change because we're living in the era of groundbreaking technologies. If entirely different technologies will come along years down the road, everything might change. But currently, the major driver is the development of petrochemistry and gas and its production of polyethylenes, polypropylenes, so that those materials are used in consumer goods, machinery, equipment, their share in transport and heating and utilities, housing sector will drop. But on the whole, the demand for oil will remain high because this is one of the most sustainable sources of production. Thank you. I have a similar question, slightly changed and modified. I have this question for Minister of Oil and Trade, representative of Kazakhstan, Minister of Energy of Kazakhstan, and I'm here to remind you that the market after the disintegration of the Soviet Union is just very great. In Kazakhstan, it was number 2 after Russia when it comes to the energy reserves. And actually, Americans, Chinese, and national companies are predominant in this market. What's your take on it? Thank you. I'm the Minister of Energy of Kazakhstan. I'm Tanat Raspayev, and I would like to support my colleague Alexander Valentinovich in what he's saying. 2 years back from now, in 2017, we had exhibition which was dedicated to studying the energy of the future, and we conducted work related to that. And together with McKinsey, a famous company, we did the study of the future, the market research in energies, far side 2050. As the result, we analyzed 6 million data covering 139 countries. We studied all the current technological, social, and other trends which exist around the world and in Kazakhstan as well. And we just drew conclusions. We should take on board measures to rehabilitate the planet and to balance demand and supply. But the total demand for energy by 2050 could reduce by 3% at least, provided we are doing energy efficiency measures in a good way. Well, as to Kazakhstan, what is the efficiency of using energy resources in energy sector of Kazakhstan? Let me finish, then I'll answer this one. We can see that the consumption of conventional sources will scale down, whereas the role of the renewables will hike. The cost of generation on renewables will be reducing drastically, and we'll see that gas consumption will not slump because gas will be out there for a long time, for way into the future as traditional source. But as to the global coal demand, by 2050, it will be axed by 50%. Actually, because there is nothing we can do with this, because coal sector actually is not developing. Now there are no cheap technologies to make coal production clean technology yet. I will support in what Alexander Vladimir said. The demand for oil will reach its upswing by 2029, 2030. Then there will be very small growth and plateau, and then the slump. By 2055, it will not be 88, but it will be 95, 96 million barrels daily consumed by all the countries together. But that's also related to streamlined programs for transportation after 2030. They will be massively using electromobiles in all the countries. So that is the future of the energy. That's our outlook. And we came to some conclusions. And I agree with the previous speaker. One of the priorities for us is the development of petrochemistry and gas. We created the free trade zone. We're coming up with unparalleled tax incentives of companies developing polyethylene, polyprotein, polyaromatics. More than $3 billion will be invested into the streamlined infrastructure of one of those free trade zones for investors not to have any problems, because oil we're going to produce slightly more than 90 plus million ton per annum we produce, and we think that in the nearest future the production level will exceed 100 million. It will be at the notch of 104 or 105 million. We'll have to do something without it. Associated gas is also produced by us. So one of the directions for us will be the development of petrochemistry and gas. And it's not an eye-opener, but we should study those trends and to make progress, and those markets should be predictable. And we should participate in such important forums as this one to exchange ideas. As to EOR, we have been working on this ratio, oil recovery enhancement ratio, and actually, but it's about something else, actually. Actually, it's offshore Caspian Sea. It's another structure of occurrence. We have got heavier fractions, and we are working in deep waters as well. So we take on board all state-of-the-art methods of filling in the beds, polymer filling, hydrofracks, and so on. We are keeping abreast of the newest technologies. Once again, I call upon all of you. All the panels, all the participants are top-notch global experts, so we should discuss global markets. I would like to get the answer from Minister of Energy of Azerbaijan Republic. Same question. Yes, do be brief. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for having been invited to participate in this gala forum. And of course, I would like to highlight the role of this high-token event from the standpoint of outreaching young, aspiring specialists, because the entire energy transformation which is happening before our very eyes around the world, by all means, it's based on state-of-the-art technologies, on innovations, and it's common knowledge that first and foremost, it's young specialists, young aspiring scientists who will develop this sector into the future. So they have got a great responsibility when they participate in those global transformations, energy transformations, and this technology 4.0 is not just about transformations per se, transformations of energy from one form into another. There is a lot more to it than that. It's also about political, economic, and social implications which come into play directly, mindful of what has been happening regarding technology 4.0. We're talking about the role of oil and gas, first of all, but we can divide them in a way. Oil, in point of fact, from the environmental standpoint, is a bit challenging nowadays as a stockpile. And alongside with that, let's take a good look at the international energy market. Three of our colleagues, we have been quite intensively engaged in this work, and Alexander Valentinovich already mentioned that. So what is happening out there? We have to deal with the volatility of this market, price volatility, which is indicative of the fact that oil role in all this and its role for way out into the future could be sort of reduced. Apart from that, there are some other patterns and factors which could impact the situation with oil and its role in future. I would like to refer to renewables. I agree that oil and gas and coal nowadays amount up to 85%. Whereas RES in global energy balance no more than 4%. But the fact alone that year in, year out, we have been witnessing the growth between 14 to 16% in RES. Provides us with a clear-cut answer from the standpoint of our future perspectives. So I think that we can go back and forth with those discussions, and we should study this issue, but we should not overlook environmental issues and energy efficiency per se, as has been mentioned here. Globally, I can just tell you what is happening in Europe currently, mindful of the economic growth. Last year, at the European market, we witnessed the reduced consumption of electrical power. Energy efficiency impacts drastically the very essence, the very crux of energy market, and impacts the priorities we outline in relation to energy resources or their types. And there is something else to it. I would like to underscore this as well. This is the digitalization. This is the buzzword nowadays. And there are new outcomes and new experts' opinions and confirmed outcomes. In some cases, digitalization of oil and gas sector may increase production up to by 7% and right-side the costs down to by 25%. So efficiency is the fourth implicit source of energy. It's very important for way out into the future, long term rather. This issue will be on the international agenda for the international energy community. I would like to say a couple of words about Azerbaijan per se, but maybe later on. Now I would like to ask my question to the president of WPC to to more global one. For example, we know that every fifth person on planet Earth out of 6 billion plus, that is the population of our planet, they actually don't have any access to energy. And on the other hand, Mr. Floran, I have been preparing for today's panel session, and I read that there is a controversy around the world that cheap and reduced cost of electrical power generation will increase drastically the growth of population on planet Earth. It's very anti-humanistic statistics. Towards this end, I may say that currently about 2.5 billion of population on planet Earth, they use firewood and plant residue, plant waste to cook food, and more than 50% of the global population cannot afford paying for electricity. So on the one hand, the service is there, it's in high demand.
And thirdly, it is not available for the majority of the people. That is a global challenge, and in this connection, I would like to address the President of the World Petroleum Council. What is your opinion, taking into account the vision of development of the energy market tomorrow?
Thank you for a good introduction and also for this question. All scenarios tells us that we will need all energy sources that we have today for some decades to come as well. That's both fossil and renewables. The challenge really is to, at the same time, mitigate the environmental issues, the climate issues. We see that we are in the energy transition phase. We are in the beginning of it, maybe, and we see the companies around us responding to that, becoming energy companies all over the world, really. The future is certainly more electric, which means that we have to produce electricity, also to cater for these issues you said are using cooking fuels and the health effects of that. But what should we produce electricity from? The oil and gas, coal, all renewable sources, including nuclear, will be needed in that respect. We will for sure see more gas into that picture. Oil will most likely, as most predict, be more for products, refined products and petrochemicals. But one important thing is that the energy has to be affordable. For those that lack energy today, they're not the highest paying customers. It has to be affordable. And in that respect, we also have a large, as mentioned by the minister from Azerbaijan, a large potential in energy efficiency. We think that technology has always played and will play a role in this sector. Being more digital or carbon capture and storage, being technologies that can combine and solve several of these issues. We also see that geopolitics impact, making the world more unpredictable, more volatile, but that has to be handled by the industry. What's worrying me most is really the perception of this industry, in certain parts of the world especially. All the way from governments, politicians, through the educational sector, to investors, and to our young population. So that makes it so important to be here for the Future Leaders Forum, really to address those issues and get the views from the young generation that will be the leaders of the future, that will bring us into this transformational transition in reality. So we have to be here and listen and learn and find a way into the future what that will be. Thank you.
Я хотел сейчас министру
I would like to ask a question to the Minister of Energy of Russia related to environmental protection. It is known that the sun is warming our planet and the earth is heated, and theoretically when the earth, when warmth goes to the space, there is a balance that is kept in the atmosphere. There is an accumulation of greenhouse gas, that is water, steam, carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, and they interfere with removal of the heat to the atmosphere that naturally creates the conditions for a slow heating of our Earth. And of course, the question is, the more we burn, irrespective of the type of energy that we are using, we are heating, and that effect is aggravated further. Today, there is a great discussion among the scientists concerning this question. They understand that CO2 is the product which nourishes our greenery. If we look at our areas, vast areas in Russia, in Canada, and in other countries where we have a lot of forests, we think that there was a normal generation where emit CO2 and the plants consume these gases and become green. And so there is a question whether this is a super problem. And you shouldn't forget that the main consumer of CO2 is the world ocean. There is also a discussion concerning this world ocean, and now this is a separate venue as to how this process can change. So I would like to know your opinion, Alexander Valentinovich, oil and gas and global warming. What do you think about it from the viewpoint of real Russian spaces and volumes of bioresources in Russia? Please give a brief answer. Thank you. I would also like to agree that the climatic agenda today is one of the agendas that are most extensively discussed in the world, and it covers a lot of brains, and there are discussions. The Parisian Agreement, the treaty, was recently signed, and now the countries are ratifying it. Russia is also an adherent to that Parisian Treaty, and it is very important for us that the world would use at maximum the environmentally friendly types of energy resources. And here the situation is also dissimilar. Not all the countries can afford, as has already been mentioned from the economic viewpoint, to use environmentally friendly types and sources of energy. For instance, there is a discussion concerning wind energy, whether it is environmentally friendly or not. Vibration, does it affect or doesn't it affect nature? Though in terms of generation of energy, of course, probably we think that it is environmentally friendly, but the consequences have not yet been finally studied. What it means for natural resources, for the animal kingdom, though everything looks quite beautiful. However, in terms of economy, that is not a well available type of electric energy at the moment, despite the fact that the technologies become cheaper. And in Russia, we also implement a program of development of solar generation and wind energy. Recently, there was a contest under the program to attract the investments to build renewable energy sources, solar generation, wind generation, and I can note the interesting fact that the capex for the generation of 1 kilowatt hour today to build wind generation is the same as the generation of heat energy, generation of electric energy using gas in terms of capex. As to the cost of flat rate cost of electric energy for the consumer, that electric energy is several times more expensive because the coefficient of use of the installed capacity is quite low, and heat generation in Russia has that index of 67%, wind generation, the percentage of use is 10 to 12. If the windmill is not operating when it stands still, the cost of generation of electric energy is 2- or 3-fold versus heat generation. Of course, there will be a serious competition not only in terms of capex, but also in terms of how you could actually use the relevant equipment in a more qualitative way and affect intensely the balance of energy, inventing cheap accumulators and cheap sources. When we can accumulate energy not only on hydropower plants, and you know how energy is stored now, but all these means are quite expensive and they cannot compete, and generation and accumulation of electric energy and its delivery to the end user. As to the environmental agenda, this panel, I would like to note that I think that in Russia, as I've already mentioned, the most environmentally friendly energy balance is recorded because we are using a great amount of gas for generation, for thermal generation. We have about 60 to 70% of eco gas and 30% of coal for thermal generation. We have about 16 to 17% in the energy balance of energy generation, nuclear generation, and about 80% hydro generation of energy. That's if we transfer, if we analyze it in general, more than 80% are environmentally friendly types of electric energy generation. We have a well-balanced energy balance, and here we have renewable energy sources, which in Russia we realize a special program to support the generation and to implementation of new types of energy, so that will have a strong effect on improvement of the environmental conditions. As to the climate agenda, I would like to note that thermal generation is not the main problem of the use of the energy sources, if we mean the effect on the climate. All of us know that if a volcano all of a sudden will emit to the atmosphere, and if these emissions are more, that will be the impact more than the generation of thermal energy across the world. So we cannot foresee all these force majeure conditions. Probably it is correct that we're using more environmentally friendly types of energy, but I think that is not the key impact, though we're moving in the correct direction. Thank you very much. I would like to note that we have published under Scopus the scientific presentations. I read them as a reviewer, and I would like to add that more than 35% of the volumes that currently affect the greenhouse effect is not gas or cars or oil. This is our wish to eat protein food and meat. If we pass on to minimizing it, it should be clear that everything that happens around the animals results great emissions to the atmosphere. That is the statistician that was given by the doctors. They give great emissions that our sector more than 35% up to 40%, and these emissions are emissions of greenhouse gases. But we never say that we have to pass on to the plant protein. And secondly, Kyoto Agreement as the mechanism for providing the incentives of environmentally friendly technologies using coal, for instance, is not operational. And we may adopt a lot of laws, for instance, the last Parisian Treaty. In fact, this is an object of discussion for petroleum specialists and gas specialists, we were, so to say, suppressed in that interdisciplinary studies, and those who work in public sciences, so to say, are suppressing us, and we have to solve it. I would like to ask the next question concerning that extensive theme. Today we have to discuss the problem of the price for oil as a regulator of economy. We have already discussed it, but it would be objective if we do not take into account the coefficient of using energy resources in the balance. That is the most important theme. Of course, the main task for all the countries is to find to come to equal understanding of 3E, that is saving and how it will develop from the viewpoint of energy and environmental protection and energy. And without it, we won't be able to clearly determine the use of oil and gas in terms of energy security. I'd like to remind you that today, statistically, and I would like to ask two ministers of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to answer that question. I would like to give some statistical data, how much is consumed by each resident of the planet. Saudi Arabia, 28 barrels per annum, USA 24, Russia 19, Japan 15, Germany 12, Venezuela 11, China 2. But these are indicators that do not currently reflect the level condition of saving or economy or the environmental status and the coefficient of use of the raw material resources in the balance during generation or their use as the fuel for transport. So the question is, what is your vision? The price for oil today, taking into account the above said from your viewpoint, how will it move? Will it raise? Will it decrease? Or probably some other scenario of development will be? I would like to ask our expert from Azerbaijan to answer this question just in a couple of sentences. As far as I understand, that concerns macroeconomics. As to the price, the forecast concerning the price, under OPEC Plus, I think that we take our best efforts to have a positive effect on the balance at the petroleum market, and also to have a positive effect on the prices, so to maintain these prices in a balanced condition, and it would be desirable if it is within a certain range. You know today's price, but unfortunately I have to state that there are a lot of factors that can affect and really affect the petroleum market. And of course, these are the economic factors, the factors related to growth or decline in the global economy, different crises, political crisis. There is a whole number of factors which affect the prices. As to the forecasting or prediction, it is rather difficult. It is very difficult. Under that cooperation agreement, we are trying to take our best efforts to ensure it. I would like to synthesize it not globally, but for Azerbaijan. How do you predict it in your development, take into account the specific market? There are some oil and gas markets. There is a threat towards Iran now. How would you consider from the viewpoint of an influential player in the Caspian region for the next half a year? As for Azerbaijan, the increase of the oil price at the international market from $60 to $70, that price is most acceptable for most of the countries, both for suppliers and for consumers. But still, answering this question, I would like once again to note the importance of stability of the price so that this price would not fluctuate, decrease or increase, but remain stable, which will make it possible further development. Thank you very much. And your colleagues from Kazakhstan, what ideas does he have? You can compare it because you have three players and three consumers take into account the representatives of the company, your national companies, China and the USA. You have a simplified idea about the energy in Kazakhstan. The largest consumer of our energy resources, oil, is Europe.
We supply to China several million tons per annum. So oftentimes I see mass media coverage, especially Russian market researchers' opinions about some implications that were not transparent, just the reverse. We have got very transparent economy. We create very good preferences and incentives for investors from different countries to come along and helping us to develop very complex fields to facilitate the GDP growth. But as to your question about oil prices, of course, we should be very careful what we say, because what we see now might impact oil prices, because as to the volumes of production, it's 13 or 15 million barrels. That's the production. So we should be very careful describing that. My colleague from Azerbaijan put it very carefully, and by the same token, I would like to support the idea that volatility of oil prices is bad for all, because we oil-producing countries should forecast our profits. Companies should be aware of what would be their capex. We should have predictable price. There could be some price range, of course, but it should not be overbroad. We should have this comfortable price band so that global oil community will concentrate in this band corridor. And of course, we are ready and willing to make our own contribution into this dialogue between the countries. I've got to thank you. Those responses demonstrate the fact that the oil price, the conventional standard oil price, the way it evolves in the market, the difference between demand and supply, actually, so we can see that there could be some statistical outliers here, and so there could be slightly different rules of the game. There are geopolitical implications here as well. I have a question. The president of WPC, Mr. Fjorand, currently oil consumption in most way has been gearing towards development of of transportation systems. 75% of entire oil we process is used in transportation sector. Up to 30%. This goes to energy sector. So the issues of increased production and oil recovery factors are very important for different countries. With China and CIS, this is very topical because I hear those figures are much lower than the global capacity, but 30% only goes to energy potential, 70% of oil production goes into transportation sector. So I have a question for Mr. President of WPC. We're talking about environmentally free transport of the future, electric cars. Electric cars will be clean and they will make the atmosphere cleaner in metropolitan areas where it will be. But he'll be plugged into the plug and actual electricity they'll get for electrical cars will go from dirty technologies, I mean oil and gas treated, and the efficiency and energy consumption, electricity consumption will be 3 times higher than those who work on fuel oil now. So I have a question. Should we protect some big metropolitan areas promoting this fashionable trend of electromobiles? Secondly, will electric cars be broadly used in future, or will they be used only in some of the big cities? And how it could change the need for oil in the market? Floor is yours, Mr. Führer.
Thank you. That was a challenging question. I am living in a country named Norway, which has done something when it comes to electrical cars. It's done because of incentives and because of the energy supply is 99% hydropowered. So that means electricity going into those cars are produced by renewable energy, so that climate budget calculations are positive. I think there are several elements when it comes to electricity of cars. Some countries are different, and I would like to see Norway is different in that respect. But most countries produce energy from an energy mix that consists of several elements, to a very large degree, oil and gas. And in that respect, that climate budget becomes different. There are other issues related to electrical vehicles, but that's also when it comes to air pollution. And of course, then this becomes an issue for larger cities to handle air pollution, and at the same time get some benefit when it comes to the climate. But for me, it's more that there is an energy mix that goes into producing that electricity, fueling those cars. It has to be taken into consideration. There is also use of metals, minerals into the production of especially the batteries. That is an issue to address. So the development of electric cars, which is so far very limited globally, but mainly in a few regions and major cities, is a discussion that will go on for a while and have to be seen in an energy mix and this energy transition total picture.
Thank you very much. I would like to get down to a very important topic for us, the professionals. To which extent the competence of our oil and gas sector is high? To what extent nowadays we are being criticized by pseudo-environmentalists, and to what extent some of the opinions, general opinions are justified that oil and gas sector is the sector which creates very big problems, not in ecology and environment as well, but problems for some of the economies of the countries. When big-time officials of some countries are saying that a country sitting on the needle is being like an addict of oil and gas, and it's our curse, and there is gas glut, oil glut, and so on. So give me the answer to the question from your perspective, the panelists. I'll refer to certain issues which, from your perspective, are very topical and very important for oil and gas companies which work under your leadership. I'll name only three. First one, it's business climate, doing business. Secondly, scientific progress and contemporary groundbreaking technologies which are very needed, most needed. And thirdly, it's the top-notch specialists, whether there are enough specialists in this sector. Alexander Valentinovich, everything you named, to my way of thinking, is extremely important. We couldn't somehow bring them like number one, number two, number three by importance. I would like to see that benign, streamlined fiscal system for our sector would boost investments and R&D also in the sphere of EOR and being environmentally friendly, energy efficiency. Fiscal systems are different in different countries. So the industry's competitive edge depends on this factor as well. For several years now, we have been increasing the Siberian production, the development of hard-to-recover resources, and presently in oil and gas sector we have been striving to create smooth conditions for more efficient use of our natural resources in Western Siberia, especially to increase EOR. And in Russia presently we prepared the roadmap. The government of Russian Federation approved this roadmap, and there are lots of studies done. By the year end, the proposals will be taken on board by the government to encourage production and more comprehensive valorizing our fields. Before you came up with those ideas, I would like to mention that in Russia we have got very cooperation between overseas technologies and our resource companies like GPN and Shell, for example. In Western Siberia, they have already obtained great results on EOR using specific makeups and compositions, like just different additives and dopes, which increase EOR up to 82%. For me, that's something outstanding. If that's the way it is, it's wonderful, such a high intensity enhanced oil recovery. In one of the fields, they increased by 20% EOR. This is very important because for Russia, EOR factor, which is different between different companies, something between 29 to 33%. This is history. We should do something about it. This is a very inferior result. So, what do you think in Kazakhstan about it? I would add to that today in the forum, it's a forum of young leaders of this sector, and I'd suggest the generation ahead of those energy specialists to say that it's not just about extensive development of our industry per se we should take care of, but we should discuss energy efficiency. Or GDP energy capacity of Kazakhstan, for example, is several-fold higher versus energy capacity on the average of OECD countries. Yes, the
32
resources are around. It's 32 billion reserves in oil equivalent in BTU, oil, gas, uranium, but it's not the curse, just the reverse. It's a good basis for economic diversification. The economy should be diversified by our generation ahead in such a way that competitive edge of those sectors would skyrocket, and resource consumption by those ancillary sectors as well should slump down to the level at which it is in advanced countries. That's the gimmick. You can consume 100 million tons, but do it inefficiently, or instead you could consume less, but do it more efficiently. That's bottom line. I would like to recap on that as well. Yes, I agree that scientific advancement and progress is not just about valorizing upstream, downstream perspective, whatever, but also the way we use it. Incineration, steam generation is the outdated technology. Generating an electrical power generation, it should disappear. All the technologies used. We should get rid of steam generation, which hampers the situation. Same question with a brief answer. What do you think about it in Azerbaijan?
Ну, естественно, я сейчас постараюсь так по возможности близко ответить,
to
быть ближе к сути вашего вопроса. Значит, дело должно быть поставлено правильно.
First of all, we should figure out how we should have efficient governance of this sector, because this sector is high priority. Science, groundbreaking technologies are equally important, but we live in the era of IT, high communication, international cooperation. We can do that easily, but as to fostering our own human capital, human talent, this is quite challenging. This is a rather vulnerable issue. I mean, we should do it consistently in a well-conceived way to foster young specialists, which are our future. First of all, I would say that number one here will be human potential development. Thank you. Mr. Torfuran, what do you think about it?
For the oil and gas industry, technology has been always important in progress, in developing the world further. And I think that will continue to be so. So we really depend on the brains and the education system today and for the future to make that happen also in the coming years. And for that, for our industry, it's so important to be able to attract talents and to keep them. And in that respect, the perception of this industry today is a big challenge in many countries. So we have to work hard, I think, in the external area to demonstrate what we really are, the energy realities, how important this industry is in a global context, how IT intensive this industry really is. So it should attract the generation of the millennials and the Z generation, as it's called, which is very much into a different way of working than we are used to, using social media and technology to very much, to a larger degree. Thank you.
Ну, я согласен, потому что Норвегия
Yes,
является
I agree
примером,
because
когда
Norway is a very
потребительское
good example
отношение в
when
обществе к подачкам со стороны
the
государства, субсидии на
attitude
сохранение
of
дали
the
возможность фактически большей частью
companies
населения просто
in
не
the country
работать. Потому
or
что если ты
people
начинаешь работать,
are
то
on
ты
the
получаешь там на 3, на
unemployment
4%
benefit. They are used to
дополнительно
get something
больше,
from the
ежели ты не
state because
работаешь.
actually,
Поэтому и
if you're
шведы,
employed,
и
your
финны, и
salary will
русские на
not be that
платформах
much
все
higher
работают,
than the
так сказать, на
benefits.
экономику, а
What I
свой народ
mean
— это
is that
большая
we are
проблема
trying
тунеядцев в
to
этой
save the
связи. Поэтому,
resources,
естественно,
actually. What I
компетенция
mean is the
именно
great new
отрасли в
competences
каждой
in oil
стране —
and gas
это
sector
крайне
in each
актуальная
and every
проблема
country is
сегодня,
very topical,
фактически.
very
И во
important.
многом, в том
And in
числе и вот
many
это наше
ways,
мероприятие,
also,
дает сигнал,
this
что это
international
высокотехнологичная отрасль.
forum
И
is
вот даже в
indicative
фильме
of the
сегодня на
fact that
перерыве было
we
сказано,
are
надо
working in a
поступать
high-tech
именно в те
sector.
вузы,
And
которые
in the
дадут
recess,
возможность
we
быть
had the
именно в
video, we
экономике
watched the video
индустриализационной, быть
trailer, and
самообеспеченным,
it was
самодостаточным, теоретически, если
about
ты
the
получил хорошее
career
знание,
orientation
теоретически, а это
for
есть
young
основа
talents. They
устойчивости
should
любого
get
государства. Поэтому у
theoretical
меня вот
knowledge
вопрос
as well at
возникает,
the
я бы хотел
professional
задать
universities, which will make
министру
our respective
энергетики
countries much
Александру
stronger. I
Валентиновичу
have a
прямой
question for
вопрос. Здесь вот
Minister of
присутствует
Energy
порядка
Alexander
6
Valentinovich, and
ректоров
here
и плюс
about 6
представители
rectors are
порядка
present
20
here, and on
университетов
top of that,
России. Ну и это будет
representatives of more
сигнал
than
и для
20 universities
Казахстана, с
of
которым мы тоже
Russia of
работаем.
different
Вопрос. Вот
size,
сегодня
Kazakhstan and other
фактически
countries.
на
So I have a
образование во всех
question
странах
as to the
выделяют как
education
на
in all the
инженерно примерно одинаково.
countries.
Хотя мы знаем
It's
прекрасно, что
just
на
about the same.
подготовку
Money
горного
is
инженера,
extended from the
ну,
budget
нефтяник,
for
газовиков,
this
все это
type of
мы как бы горняки.
education, professional education.
Примерно
But
затраты
for oil
сопоставимы с
engineer, for
медициной. Это
mines
мировые
engineer,
тренды,
the
примерно. Ну, для
expenses
России
charged
эта
for this
цена
education are
теоретически колеблется
comparable to
плюс-минус где-то
change
10 тысяч
budget for
долларов в год, не
medical
меньше. И
institutions.
то, что
It's
сегодня министерство
$20,000
государство
per
выделяет,
annum per
это крохи,
one
которые измеряются
student,
где-то
something
примерно
like that.
1/3 этих затрат.
And the
Невозможно,
state
конечно,
covers
вот
one third of the
самостоятельно
expenses. It
сделать.
is
Много
impossible to
вопросов
do it
задают, и
independently.
просили мои коллеги
Many
задать вопрос,
questions are
а
asked
почему
by
не
my
тот вопрос,
colleagues
который мы
why
поднимали неоднократно,
the
ввести
question that we
целевой
have
дополнительный налог,
been
который
raising
войдет в
repeatedly.
себестоимость
Probably we should
продукции. Многие
introduce the
страны это
target
рассматривают, в том числе
tax
Америка,
that
насколько я
will be
понимаю, внедрила.
introduced into
Это
the prime cost
воспроизводство
of the
кадров.
product,
Ну,
as
это
it is done in
коэффициент там
DSA, that is
0,2-0,3 от
reproduction with
объема
the personnel,
поднятого сырья
0.2, 0.3 of the
на
volume of the
поверхность.
raw
Это дало бы
materials
возможность,
extracted to
конечно,
the surface.
по-иному
Thus, we'll
развивать
be able
и
to
влиять на
develop in a
подготовку
different
кадров.
way and
Что
to affect
угодно,
the
любой научный
training of the personnel. Any scientific potential, for instance, of a teacher cannot fill up the fact that there is no modern laboratories, and you have to introduce that understand that in addition to the diploma, high schools can provide additional competencies such as knowledge of the software, the technologies that are widely implemented, and in this connection, the state policy, the governmental policy is important, developed by the ministries and departments, so that at the governmental level, the sector that ensures the personnel for the country, the competence of the industries improved, and of course, real support is needed for the system that is called training of the personnel. Alexander Valentinovich, what is your opinion related to that? Not any solution, but just a vision of the problem. It is quite acute for Russia today. As to my opinion, I also agree that training of the personnel is one of the key elements of successful development of any sector, including oil and gas industry and our energy sectors. And both the companies have to take that into account, and programs have to be realized at the state level. We have national projects of education. All our high schools are part of the system of the state system of education, which mainly trains the specialists for our sectors of energy. Working with companies, we can see that our companies are also interested in training the personnel. they take an active part in guardian councils of our high schools. They provide the funding for the development of the material and technical base and infrastructure, and that is correct. That ensures the ordering of target specialists from themselves. That should be done. And I think this is a correct approach, that the companies are helping our high schools. For instance, I'm the head of the Guardian Council of Moscow Energy Institution, and I'm also a member of the Guardian Council of our Gubkin University. Really, a lot is being done at the level of the state education and interaction between our companies and high schools of learning. As to the target tax, I cannot say anything about this. It's the first time that I have heard this. I think that we have certain standards of financing the educational sector. We have the general policy at the federal level, and we have to comply this approach that exists today. And of course, the company should interact with high schools in terms of target order and incentives for training the personnel. And together with the Minister of the Energy and with the companies, it is necessary to form an order for development of new educational standards, so that these educational standards would comply with modern realities and technologies. And it is rather difficult to keep up the pace of development of these new technologies. So the material and technological base of our high schools should keep up with the development of the new technologies. Thank you. I would like to end my discussion giving the floor after our comments to the President of the World Petroleum Council, but I would like to sum up brief results of our vision concerning our future. We clearly understand that for the future period, we have got resources in the world, and we have to form a certain international regulator, which hasn't been mentioned today, which will in a certain way regulate this process. That is a very important theme of rational use of what we have got, and we have to efficiently use it for the benefit of our country and for the benefit of global economy. And naturally, there are some questions that arise which probably have to be resolved not only by one country, but in general. If we analyze the present-day trends, they lead to the necessity of enhancing a sort of energy diplomacy. It is obvious that any conflict that starts and is resolved by from the military positions around the invented instruments, they are around the energy problems and reforming of the energy markets and the catastrophes that we have on transport, and to the indefiniteness in the investment policy in many states. For instance, what is happening in Iran, in the Middle East now. All these things have a serious impact on not only on the region or a separate company or a country, but generally they affect the price and the sustainable development of several states, and in general the sustainable development of our civilization. We haven't raised the question that is highly important for many countries with economy under transition, such as Russia. What oil and gas as raw material resources for our economy? We don't have a clear document now, including in the energy strategy, as to what economy, to what development of economy are the resources oriented. If this is an export-oriented economy, this is one strategy. If the economy is oriented at increasing the internal demand, for instance, as China 1 year ago, they had an economy that was oriented at SMEs, and the Chinese worked for export-oriented services or goods. Now it has been clearly stated that the development of inner demand and in a market, domestic market, and I visited it half a year ago, and I was surprised with the number of extensive construction projects. There are many problems related to it in many states. There cannot exist normal development strategy, including the energy strategy, if we do not formulate that question. And of course, there are numerous problems of interstate cooperation. I'd like to remind you that there are extensive and complicated objects, for instance, the Arctic offshore, that is quite complicated from the geopolitical viewpoint. These fields are in the countries with unstable economy, and under these conditions, even transnational companies and major transnational companies would join their efforts, despite the fact that they can develop the field themselves and find the money, but they join their efforts to mitigate their risks partially. And we have to realize that the lack of direct contacts and the lack of sufficient contacts among in the global, in the world, petroleum companies, the distance between the economic environment and the scientific environment. We should organize not only fora, but some other meetings that would make it possible to communicate, to receive grants, and to get some consolidating mechanism of corporate and joint work targeted primarily at increasing the competence in the sector and respect to it and determining its place in the economy. That is quite obvious and understandable. So I'm an optimist, and I believe that we won't be left without oil and gas during transition to e-cars. There should be a weighted electric cars. There should be a weighted approach. As to alternative or renewable sources, there is no solution until we receive an answer when we're going to have storage units for electric energy. When we solve this task, other problems can be solved as well. I would like to give the final word to Mr. Thor Fjeren, who is president of the World Petroleum Council, and yesterday we also communicated and we discussed some issues concerning Norway. He is a representative of a major company, major business, Statoil company. If you can come to the podium or remain here.
I have made a presentation about energy transformation, a map of the future. Most of the issues, I could say all of the issues, has all been discussed in depth by the panel. But I can address a few comments to some of them. We have been discussing most of this, but we clearly see a growing energy demand, mainly driven by Asia, mainly driven by China and India. At the same time, there is a push in our society to decarbonize based on the issues related to climate change. We also see that renewables are growing and becoming more important in the energy mix, and that the future is becoming more and more electric, with electricity to a larger degree being produced by gas rather than oil and by renewables. and nuclear. We also see that one important element in the energy transition is the development in US, the shale development in US, also now US becoming an exporter, both oil and gas. But what's clear is that we will, for the future, for the near and medium-term future, need all energy sources that we know today to meet the global demand. Then I turn to climate change and climate impact. The industry and society in general accept that climate change is a result of industrialization, as documented by several IPCC reports, which forms the basis for the Paris Agreement. But I think also all of us can agree upon there is a long way to meet the Paris Agreement, which aims to reduce the temperature by 2 degrees centigrade. And the focus is very much on us, on our industry, which is expected to deliver a significant share of this reduction. And I think it's going forward, it will be important to how we will be able to continue to provide safe, affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy, while at the same time mitigate climate change. What will that take? I think firstly, it requires open and competitive markets. It's only the right fiscal terms and regulatory environment that large-scale, capital-intensive energy projects can succeed. So demonstrated by two of the panelists from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. Secondly, natural gas will provide a vital lower carbon energy source. It's abundant and it's affordable. And it produces only half of the carbon of coal when burned to power. It offers means to lower emissions quickly while renewables achieve scale, as well as a source of backup base load to power to address the intermittency of renewables. It doesn't blow every day, the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. And LNG is becoming a more important element into the market. It's now a globally traded commodity, and the global LNG capacity is expected to increase by about 45% from 2017 to 2022. So the patterns are beginning to shift considerably as gas overtakes oil as the world's most prime energy resource in the mid-2020s. But for gas to fully play its role, there are issues related to methane emissions. We are working with a Global Gas Flaring Reduction Initiative partnership and the World Bank to address that. A third element is that we must leverage the power of innovation and technology to make the use of oil and gas cleaner and to minimize emissions. But the final factor is policy. A Paris Agreement creates momentum, but more action is needed in terms of policy encouragement for emission reduction, such as carbon pricing, which brings the power of the market into emission reductions, making energy efficiency more attractive, and lower carbon energy sources more competitive. Then, a few words about geopolitics. Major geopolitical events have historically influenced energy prices and have had consequences to our industry. We should expect that also that will be the case for the future. The present situation is more uncertain and more unpredictable than it has been for a long time. We see global tensions on the rise, with sanctions and trade wars affecting energy prices and the global economy. Political polarization and impact on mass migration is challenging several countries. Following a long stable period, we also now see the beginning of an arms race. So for the companies and for the investors, it's important to understand geopolitical context and risks and mitigate them. And that's especially critical for our sector, which have that large upfront investments and long payback time as an issue. And these are issues very high on all companies' agenda. I have mentioned the perception of the industry and the license to operate. And it is worrying for us to see that many policymakers and regulators, investment houses, NGOs, and many others regard us as environmentally unfriendly, dirty, not safe, and not an industry for the future. So we have to respond to this, and this, I think, is a big issue for all of us, to really enter into that debate and create energy realities, and WPC want to do something in that respect. The license to operate, we can only operate in societies and communities where it's critical to operate, to understand, respect, and relate to all stakeholders, including authorities and neighbors. But we should also be recognized for creating value through jobs, taxes, royalties, production sharing mechanisms, and local content requirements. That's not very well understood. It's important to create value where we operate in local communities, create win-wins. We don't get a license to operate. We earn a license to operate, the way we work, the way we act, and the way we coexist with others. Corporate social responsibility and being a good citizen is fundamental to having the legitimacy and credibility to gain trust with the communities where we operate. As mentioned in the panel, innovation and technology is a game changer. It has always been like that. We have seen the shale revolution that completely changed the energy landscape. We have seen a remarkable reduction in renewable energy. And we have the digital era that we are into that will. It's not just about technology, but also innovative and new ways of working. But becoming more digital, we are becoming more vulnerable to cybersecurity issues, and that's something very important for industry to be able to operate safely and have regularity on the right level. But technology and the future is not only about digitalization. In the subsurface, better seismic data, better integration of data and knowledge will be more and more vital. For drilling and completing wells in unconventional is more about longer horizontals, more laterals, and a number of frac stages. And for deep water developments, it's really adding new elements to this ultimate subsea factory. And for gas, it's FLNG technologies and smaller, more flexible LNG solutions. But what's for the audience here today? I think we have to learn from this audience here. How do we deal with this issue? Because our greatest capital, the young people, is you. You are the future of the industry. A lot of experience will retire, experience that we still need, but at the same time we must attract talents with new skills. It's also demonstrated that diversity adds value and profit through different innovative approaches and new ideas. A great capital is young people, but don't let us forget another untapped resource. We should attract more women to our industry and retain them. We did a global survey a few years ago trying to establish how we can promote more women in oil and gas, and it comes up with some interesting findings and actions. Attractiveness to talents is a growing problem for the industry, especially in the OECD part of the world. It seems to be less of an issue in Russia, I think in China and India as well. But it has high attention in most companies how to handle this issue. Just a few words about WPC and what we can contribute with. It's now 86 years since the founders of the World Petroleum Council agreed to our objective, that is, promote the management of the world's petroleum resources for the benefit of all. I think that's something that we still can agree to. We had our first Congress in 1933 with 24 member countries. Now we have grown to close to 70, representing more than 95% of the world's oil and gas production and consumption. We are a non-advocacy and non-political organization having charitable status in the UK and are accredited to the United Nations. Every 3 years we have the World Petroleum Congress. Last time it was in Istanbul. Several of you were there. Any surpluses, net surpluses from the Congress goes towards charitable projects in host countries and legacy projects around the world. Collaboration and dialogue are key for the success of our industry, and we work closely with companies, with governments and multilaterals to promote the industry's role in a sustainable future. Even more important now. Our leadership conference took place in Mumbai earlier this year, addressing energy poverty, energy transition, and climate change. We are here today, opening the sixth Youth Forum, the Future Leaders Forum, organized by the Young Professionals Committee with a lot of support from many. This is, for us, a very, very important group of people, the Young Professionals Committee. It's the future leaders of the industry, and we have to work hand in hand to ensure that we are prepared for that future and that we do it the right way. We also have another new conference later this year addressing petrochemicals and refining. WPC has been known for upstream, I think, for many years, but we now also make sure that we are active in the downstream area, so we'll have a downstream conference in Bahrain in October this year. We also cover the aspects of oil and gas, and many of these are addressed by the expert workshops, which brings together international specialists from our national committees to address challenges and topics championed by one or more of our member countries. And for this cycle, we have, I think, 9 of them planned for. Some are taking place already, and there will be more taking place before we meet at the World Petroleum Congress, where thousands of industry leaders, ministers, experts come together to network, to learn and discuss the latest developments and assess the future of energy industry. We will meet again in Houston in December 2020 for what will be the 22nd World Petroleum Congress, where we will present and discuss innovative energy solutions. In 2023, we will meet in Calgary, that was decided yesterday, with a 1 vote difference to Baku. So next time, Baku, it's your turn maybe. But the topic, the theme, will be innovative energy solutions. I know that it is challenging for some of you to attend due to geopolitics. But we are working hard with the organizers to make it possible for all of us to join us there. Thank you. That was my short summary from my side on what WPC can offer.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Уважаемые коллеги.
Dear colleagues, I'm very glad that we received very good answers to many questions we raised, and the final confirmation of this is this final conclusion of the head of the Petroleum Council. My words of conclusion: we did not discuss some of the problems, maybe. The major thing in the system of operations of our oil companies are sustainability, economy, and so on. Its geopolicies. We should be aware when we finalize this discussion that the role of governmental regulation in oil and gas sector is very important. This is the basis for the development of civilized use, efficient development of not just separate companies, but of the entire economy. Towards this end, I'm here to say that the laws of market economy are indicative of the fact that the state should regulate in more efficient way, but not to participate in production. Then it will be non-transparent economy at the stage of prospecting and exploration, because we have got some negative examples of that in Russia. The engagement of state in exploration. State governmental regulation should be straightforward, clear-cut, transparent. There should be proactive laws without any footnotes. That will foster a business environment and business climate, provided each and every country has got transparent and straightforward business climate, then attracting investments will increase. Sanctions or no sanctions. Money like quietness and normal business climate. So it will be a win-win situation for all, not just this or that company investing. It will be a win-win situation for all, for competitors, for the market. And the tougher the competition, the less would be the price. So at the end of the day, consumer will win as well. So I'm deeply convinced that the perspectives we studied from the standpoint of resources, economy, ecology, and so on, against the backdrop of increasing efficacy of governmental regulation, is also important. There should be a synergetic effect, and we should have a clear-cut market-based system of state governmental regulation. I've always been underscoring this. Then science will be developing, talents will develop, and actually this should be the driver of changes. As to the resources, especially petroleum resources, mean progress. They should not be used to the detriment of economy. It's a good advantage for the company to make big strides forward in developing its economy and create benign social environment, not only in the mining regions whereby you produce, but in the countries whereby this economy is in place. I would like to thank all of you for participating, and special thanks to our great experts, to our panelists who were very outspoken in their responses. But as to some of the issues and questions, of course, it's not a very clear-cut situation in the market yet, but you all were very sincere in answering. I think you'll find answers to many questions these days. Now there will be a ceremony of awards, so I would like to give the floor to next participant of the program.